The sky above Torvak 9 cracked open with burning ships falling like cursed stars. Fire rained from the heavens, but the ground didn't shake. It waited, as if even the planet itself feared what was coming. Beneath those blackened clouds, she stood still among the ruins, armored in obsidian, her long whip-like tail twitching behind her like a fuse waiting to ignite. They called her Vera of the Clawed Moon. Her enemies called her the Last Curse. None survived her wrath, not pirates, not warlords, not even planetary generals. She had ended 13 civil wars, ripped the hearts out of tyrants with her bare claws, and she had smiled only once, when her own mother died. Even among her kind, she was a weapon that walked. When the humans arrived, she didn't blink. Their fleet was small, poorly built, primitive compared to the rest of the galaxy. Everyone laughed when the humans declared neutrality. They laughed louder when the humans demanded peace. No one was laughing when a single human ship tore through a blockade like it was cloth. Vera watched it happen from orbit. She felt no fear, only curiosity. What kind of creature builds weak machines, walks with soft bodies, and still dares to challenge fleets forged in the void? They called themselves explorers, yet they moved like ghosts, dying quietly, but always returning with something stronger, something sharper. Then came the siege of Graktal. She led it herself. 5,000 elite warriors at her back. The city was held by a few hundred humans and their alien allies. It was supposed to fall within a day. It lasted 11. On the 12th, Vera stepped onto the battlefield. The first thing she saw was fire, not from weapons, from humans dragging burning metal, building traps out of scrap, and singing while they worked. Who sings in war? Only the mad, or the fearless. She killed the first row of defenders herself. They didn't scream. They didn't even beg. They looked her in the eyes and fell silent. But then she saw something she never expected. One of them stood up after taking a direct plasma hit to the chest. His skin charred, armor broken, blood pouring. And yet, he smiled. That grin stayed with her. It wasn't mockery. It wasn't arrogance. It was defiance. Not because he wanted to win, but because he refused to be broken. Even as he died, he grinned, like pain had no claim over him. Vera blinked. She rarely did. But for a moment, the battlefield grew quiet in her head. She crushed his skull with one strike, but she didn't forget him. The next day, she returned to the field, alone. She wanted to see if there were more like him. There were. Not strong, not fast, not advanced. But all of them carried that same stubborn light behind their eyes. It was not pride. It was something worse. Hope. A belief that they would win simply because they had to. No prophecy. No backup. Just will. On the 4th day, she stopped using her claws. She wanted to understand. Them, these humans. These strange, laughing, breakable beings who stood against monsters without flinching. On the 5th day, the human commander sent a message. It was not a threat, not a surrender. It was a joke. Vera read it 3 times. She didn't laugh. She couldn't. No one had ever joked with her before, not even her own bloodline. She replied with silence. But inside her chest something shifted, a memory of a younger version of herself, one who once believed in light, in something more than war. That version had died long ago, or so she thought, because the next time she met the commander, face to face, he did something no one had ever dared. He smiled, and she didn't kill him. The human commander's name was Elias Rourke, a name that sounded soft, like mist over steel. Yet nothing about him was weak. When Vera met him at the center of the battlefield, the ground around them had turned to ash and glass. But he stood tall, despite cracked ribs and a torn shoulder. No armor, no weapons in his hands, just a simple smile carved into a bloodied face. She waited for him to attack, or to beg, or to threaten, but instead he nodded like they were old friends meeting by chance. He didn't fear her. He didn't even hesitate. That made her tilt her head slightly, a motion her enemies usually didn't live long enough to witness. "You always look this angry," Elias said, wiping dirt from his chin. "Or did I forget to send flowers again?" The silence between them could have shattered a planet. Behind her, her warriors stirred, ready to pounce. But Vera raised one hand. They stopped. She didn't understand what this human was doing, but she wanted to. He wasn't just mocking death. He was dancing with it and somehow making it laugh. "You're wounded," she said finally, voice sharp like ice broken by a blade. "I've been worse," Elias replied, shrugging. "Back home, my sister broke my nose with a soup ladle. I think that hurt more." That one made Vera blink again. She hated that. She hated blinking when he spoke. It meant he got inside her thoughts. But what disturbed her more wasn't his humor. It was her reaction to it. Something in her chest twitched again. A muscle she had forgotten. Or maybe something older than war. Not pity, not weakness. Recognition. Elias didn't flinch as she stepped closer, her claws inches from his heart. She could hear the breaths of her soldiers holding still, waiting. For the moment she'd tear him apart. But instead she asked, "Why do you smile even when you bleed?" He didn't answer right away. He looked past her at the broken sky, at the smoke curling around them like ghosts. "Because," he said softly, "someone has to remind the dark that we're still here." Vera had seen soldiers speak of courage before they died. She had heard legends, war songs, and battle cries, but this was different. This was not performance. This was a truth carved deep into his bones. That night, she didn't sleep. Not because of dreams. She never dreamed. Monsters didn't dream. But because she kept seeing that grin, and she kept feeling something strange in her chest every time she replayed it. The next day, the war continued. But Vera began holding her troops back. She told them it was strategy. Let the humans exhaust themselves. Watch their defenses stretch, but in truth she wanted to see more of them. She wanted to see if Elias was a rare spark, or if all humans burned that way. She found medics shielding children with their own bodies, engineers turning broken mechs into living barricades, a farmer turned sniper who hadn't missed a single shot in 4 days. They weren't soldiers, not by birth, but they fought like they had something no empire could forge. Vera stood atop a ridge one morning, watching them rebuild yet again, and something inside her broke. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was quiet, like a chain slipping from an old collar. She returned to her command post and dismissed her officers. She sat alone for hours, and when her reflection shimmered on her war table, for the first time in her long, violent life, she didn't see a monster. She saw a mirror, a girl who once believed she could be more, and she wondered if Elias smiled at that version of her. Would she have smiled back? Rain fell on the 6th night. Vera stood without cover, her armor steaming as the drops hit its heated plates. Around her the jungle whispered, alive with movement, distant gunfire, and the groans of injured beasts dragged into battle. She listened without truly hearing. Her thoughts were with Elias Rourke. She had met thousands of warriors across systems. They had begged, raged, or bowed. But Elias, he talked to her like she was still a person, like she could be more than what the galaxy had forced her to become. She didn't understand it. So she returned to the front lines. Not to kill. Not this time. To observe. He was there again, bleeding again, laughing again, fixing a broken walker with his bare hands and shouting for someone named Miller to stop crying and throw him a wrench. Vera watched from the trees, cloaked. Her scouts stayed behind. She gave no orders, just stood and stared at the human, who kept standing even after everything that should have broken him. He glanced in her direction. She froze. No way he could see her. The camo field was perfect, but somehow he smirked, as if he knew. She left in silence. Later, she sat in her personal chamber aboard the flagship. The walls were made from the bones of the last warlord she had slain. Her trophies glowed around her, but they felt cold now, soulless. She activated the holoscreen, scanned through intercepted transmissions from the human base. No strategic data, just voices, laughter, arguments over food, bad jokes, even someone singing. Vera didn't understand how they could act like this wasn't war, like they were living instead of just surviving. She listened to the recording again, and again. Then, without knowing why, she replayed it one more time and smiled. Just barely, just enough to feel it. The next day, her fleet received a strange order: cease fire for one rotation. Her officers were furious, confused. Some questioned her. A few even whispered treason. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. Instead, she left her warship alone and walked into the no-man's land between their forces. And there he was, waiting. He stood in the open with a bruised lip and a cracked rib, grinning like he'd been expecting her. No guards, no weapons, just that maddening, sincere expression. "You came," he said. "I didn't tell you I would," she replied. "You didn't have to." They walked in silence toward a crater filled with rainwater. No one else followed. For a moment, they weren't enemies, just beings who had seen too much. "You're not like the stories," Elias said, finally breaking the quiet. "I am the stories," Vera replied. "Maybe," he said, "but I think you got trapped inside them." That struck something inside her harder than any blade. She turned to him, eyes narrowing. "You think you understand me?" "I think I'm starting to." They stared at each other, both scarred, both tired, both leaders of forces that didn't know what peace looked like anymore. "I came to destroy your kind," she said. "And I came to stop monsters," he answered softly. "Am I one?" "You were." She didn't flinch. She didn't growl. She didn't kill him. Instead, she asked, "And now?" He looked at her, really looked at her, and said, "Now you're a question." Something warm and strange filled her chest. She didn't recognize it. Hope, or maybe something older, something human. The battlefield remained still for 20 hours. It was the first time in decades that her forces had not moved. No drills, no patrols, no raids. Vera's commanders fumed behind closed doors. Her warriors sharpened blades that would not be drawn. No one dared question her. Not yet. But rumors spread like heat from a plasma core that their great warlord had been seen speaking to the human commander, that she had returned without blood on her hands, that she hadn't slept since. Vera stood on the edge of her warship's observation deck, watching Earth's blue insignia flicker through the rain clouds below. The stars had never looked so far away, and for once, she didn't care about distance. She cared about the quiet between battles. It was maddening. So she called him again. Elias didn't look surprised when she arrived at the crater again. In fact, he held something in his hand this time, a silver box, worn, bent. He offered it with one eyebrow raised. "Peace offering," he said. "Or poison. Depends on how you feel about chocolate." She blinked. He opened the box. Inside were small dark pieces of something unfamiliar. She narrowed her eyes at them. "Sweet," he added. "Harmless. Mostly." Vera hesitated. She hadn't eaten anything not processed by military standards in years. But she reached out slowly, claws scraping the box's edge, and took one. She bit, and paused. The taste exploded in her mouth like nothing she'd experienced. Not from any ration, not from any feast. "What is this?" she asked. "Childhood," he said with a smile. She didn't smile back, but she didn't spit it out either. That was enough for him. They sat together on the broken rim of the crater, eating and not speaking for a while. Finally, she broke the silence. "I was not born a monster." "I know," Elias said. "You don't. I see it in your eyes." She looked away. I used to believe in things, she whispered. Before the wars, before the betrayals, before I watched my people turn their dreams into machines and feed them blood. Elias nodded slowly. I believed too. Once. But belief alone doesn't survive war. He tossed a rock into the puddle below. The ripples stretched between them like threads. But it can come back, he added, quieter. She looked at him then, not as a curiosity or an enemy, but as something else. A reminder. I don't know how, she admitted. That's the point. You're not supposed to know. You just try. Her claws flexed unconsciously. The warrior in her still screamed for purpose, for control. But something deeper, a voice she thought long buried, whispered that maybe letting go was strength too. That night she ordered the outer trenches of her army to pull back 10 clicks. No one understood why, but she did. It was the first step, not of surrender, of becoming something more than what the galaxy had made her. She fell asleep for the first time in 6 years. Not because she was tired, but because she felt safe enough to close her eyes. In her dream, she was young again, running, laughing, unmarked by scars, and somewhere in the distance she heard a human voice telling her to keep going. The truce wasn't official. No treaty was signed. No grand speech declared it. But something unspoken passed between the human camps and Vera's armies. A pause. A breath held by the stars themselves. For the first time, her soldiers began to whisper about more than orders. Some dared wonder if the war could end. Others feared she had grown soft, but none dared say it aloud. Not after she stood before them, gaze sharp, voice cold, and said, "Pull back. We do not fight shadows that laugh." She didn't explain what that meant, but in her private chamber, she played back Elias's messages. Jokes, updates, stupid stories about earth animals called penguins that she could barely picture. He said they waddled. That made her frown. But the thought stayed in her mind longer than she liked. She began replying. At first, short words, then longer ones, then questions, and somewhere in the static between their signals, something strange grew. Not affection. Not yet. But understanding. A bridge built from broken pieces of two very different souls. One night he asked something unexpected. "What's your real name?" She stared at the screen. No one had asked her that in decades. "Vera is my name," she typed. He replied instantly. "No, not your title. Not the name they chant before battle. The name someone once whispered to you with love." Her fingers hovered above the panel. Then slowly she typed, "Sorai." It was a name not spoken since childhood. A name she buried with her past. Elias didn't laugh, didn't joke. He simply replied, "Thank you." That night she took off her armor. Not because of heat, not because of pain, because she wanted to remember what it felt like to be skin, not steel. Elsewhere, her commanders grew restless. Some plotted. One, General Yorick, dared to call a meeting without her. "There is weakness in her now," he growled. "We must strike while the humans are off guard. She has forgotten who we are." But Vera was not blind. She entered mid-sentence. Yorick froze as she stepped into the war chamber without her full armor, wearing only light battle robes, but her presence filled the room like thunder. "I forgot nothing," she said. Yorick raised his voice. "We are warriors, not diplomats." "We are survivors," she replied. "And survivors must know when to stop bleeding." Another commander dared speak. "Are we not monsters? Is that not what they see?" Vera's eyes glowed. They did. Until one smiled. Silence. She let it stretch until it wrapped around them like a noose. "I will not order another assault. Any who disobey will not see the stars again." No one argued after that. Back on the surface, she met Elias again. No armor, no guards. Just two beings with too many scars and not enough reasons to keep adding more. He handed her something strange. A small book. Physical, ink and paper. She took it carefully. "It's a story," he said, "from Earth, about a beast who thought she couldn't love." She looked at the title, Beauty and the Beast. Her brow furrowed. "Which am I?" she asked. "Depends on the chapter," he said with a grin. And for the first time since childhood, she laughed. It was a rough, cracking sound, unused but real. She didn't know what this was between them. It wasn't alliance. It wasn't surrender. But it was something new. And that terrified her more than war ever had. The rain came again, softer this time, washing the ash from the edges of old craters. Vera stood beneath it, head tilted back, letting the droplets streak down her face. She hadn't felt clean in years. Not truly. Not until now. Her people still watched her like she might wake from a strange dream and return to bloodshed. But she didn't. She sat with Elias nearly every day, sharing words, silences, and slow truths neither of them had ever dared speak aloud. He told her about Earth, about oceans that danced and animals that glowed in the dark, about laughter, so strong it could break grief, about how even after war humans built again, not to forget, but to forgive. She told him about her sister, about how she once sang to the moons before their empire forced her into a combat suit and sent her to die, about how Vera buried her beneath a tree that never grew again, about how she vowed to never feel that kind of pain again, so she became the weapon instead. Elias listened. Always. He never pitied her. He never offered comfort unless she asked. He just stayed. That was enough. Then came the order. A deep space signal burst through her comms, bypassing all encryption. From the Empress herself. The war was to begin again. Full assault. No retreat. Her silence was not enough anymore. Vera read the message 3 times. Her claws twitched. She paced her chamber. She looked at the stars. And then she summoned Elias. They met on neutral ground again, though it no longer felt neutral. "I've been ordered to attack," she said. He didn't flinch. "And will you?" "I don't know." He sat beside her on a broken stone slab. "You don't have to answer now." "That's the problem. I think I already have." She stood and looked him in the eyes. "I was made to be a monster, but what if I'm not anymore?" Elias gave a small smile. "Then don't prove them right." It wasn't that simple. She wished it were. If she defied the Empress, it meant open rebellion. Her army would fracture. Some would follow her. Others would call her traitor. War would not end. It would simply shift. But if she obeyed, she would lose what little she had just begun to rebuild. "I cannot save them all," she whispered. "Then save who you can," Elias said, "and start there." That night she called a secret meeting of her most loyal warriors. Not the ones who bowed the deepest, but the ones who had bled beside her without question. "I am not the same creature you followed into fire," she told them. "But I am still your commander. And I ask you now, not as a warlord, but as one of you. Will you follow me if I choose another path?" There was silence. Then one knelt, then 2, then more. "We followed you because you were strong," one of them said. "Now we follow you because you're right." She sent a single message to the Empress. Not words. Just a symbol. A broken crown. She had chosen. There would be consequences. But for the first time, she didn't fear them, because someone had smiled at her and made her believe she could still be something more. The Empress responded swiftly. A single war cruiser emerged from hyperspace above the contested zone. Its hull shimmered with imperial gold, and its weapons glowed with pulsing red lines, fully charged. No warnings, no negotiations. The message was clear. Vera was no longer considered a commander. She was a traitor. Elias stood beside her on the cliff overlooking the camp. Smoke from burnt rations curled in the air, mixing with the scent of rain and soil. The human lines had pulled back slightly, not in fear, but in solidarity. Elias had made no orders. His soldiers did it on their own. "They're here for me," Vera said flatly. I know, Elias replied. I could still surrender. You won't. She turned toward him. And what makes you so sure? Because you're not a monster anymore. His words hit harder than any blast. Vera summoned her fleet captains. Half didn't respond. Some ships had already fled the system. Fear worked faster than loyalty. But those who arrived were the ones who mattered. I made a choice, she told them. You're free to make yours. They looked at one another, then back to her. One by one they knelt, placing clawed fists against the floor. For Sorai, one of them said. Her heart jolted at the sound of her real name spoken with reverence, not fear. Meanwhile, the Imperial cruiser descended. Vera prepared for war, but not against humans. This time she would fight for her own soul. The enemy was the system that made her a weapon. As the cruiser neared atmosphere, it launched smaller, drones broadcasting the Empress's voice across all channels. Vera, you are stripped of rank. Surrender now or be erased. She didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she turned to Elias. Will your people help me? I already sent the message, he said. Within hours, 3 Earth ships jumped into orbit. Nothing flashy, nothing large, but fast, nimble, and loyal. The combined forces of one former monster and one stubborn human stood alone against an empire that ruled half the galaxy. And yet, Vera felt no fear. She felt ready. When the Empress spoke again, her voice was colder. You are alone. Vera smiled. I am not. She transmitted a single image across all bands, a picture Elias had taken of her and him standing together, armorless, beneath the crater moonlight. A moment of peace, a moment of truth. The galaxy saw it. Billions did. Some called it treason. Some called it madness. But others, scattered across colonies and broken war zones, saw something else. Hope. The first blast came at dawn. The Imperial cruiser fired on her warship. Vera launched interceptors instantly, but she knew the numbers were against them. Still, she refused to run. Elias stood beside her as plasma fire lit the sky. If we die here, she said, I want you to know something. I already know, he whispered. But say it anyway. She hesitated. I was never a monster, she said. No, he agreed. You were a mirror. They clasped hands. The ground shook, but they didn't. And as the storm of fire began to fall, a new force arrived from deep space. Unmarked ships, fast and sleek. Alien designs from once conquered worlds. Crews made of those Vera had once terrified, but who now came not to destroy her but to protect the one who chose change. Because monsters don't inspire revolutions, but broken hearts that dare to heal, they do. The battlefield was chaos. Sky split with streaks of red and blue. Vera's warships, those loyal to her heart, not her bloodline, danced like blades around the Imperial cruiser. The humans fought not for conquest, but for the promise she now carried. Around her, the air sang with fire and hope. Vera stood at the command platform of her flagship, armor sealed, blades holstered. Not to intimidate, but to protect. Her voice was calm, her orders precise. She had spent a lifetime bringing death. Now she was saving lives. The Imperial cruiser broke formation. Desperate, it targeted the human vessels, hoping to fracture her resolve. But Elias Rourke was not made of cracks. His ship, a battered Earth destroyer with patched engines and mismatched plating, dove directly toward the cruiser's broadside. Not in retreat, in defiance. He opened a direct channel. This is Commander Elias Rourke, he said, smiling through blood. And if I'm going down today, it won't be without playing one last song. Then, he transmitted music. Earth music, old, wild, defiant, a roaring anthem of rebellion that echoed across all bands. Vera heard it in her ship. She didn't know the words, but the rhythm struck her bones. She gave a single command. All units, pincer formation, save the humans. We end this. The Allied fleet surged. Alien allies who once feared her now flew beside her. Her banner no longer meant terror. It meant truth. The Imperial cruiser faltered. One final blast from Vera's flagship struck its core, and the Titan burned. It didn't explode. It crumbled. Bit by bit, like an empire losing its breath. The galaxy watched as its most feared symbol fell not to might, but to mercy. After the battle, silence returned. Not the silence of war, the silence of peace. Vera descended to the surface. Elias was there, arm in a sling, face bruised but grinning like always. "You really meant to die for me?" she asked. "No," he said. "I meant to live for what you chose." She stepped closer. "You're a strange creature. I'm human. We specialize in that." He held out something small. The book. Beauty and the Beast. "I finished it," she said softly. "And I think I'm not the beast after all." He tilted his head. "Then who are you?" She looked up at the stars. For once, they didn't feel so far away. "I'm Sorai," she whispered, "and I choose who I become." Elias took her hand. Around them, humans and aliens began rebuilding. Not fences, not borders, homes. Vera walked among them without her armor. Children laughed when she passed. One even gave her a flower. She blinked down at it. So fragile, so bright. She kept it. And as the stars watched, unblinking, eternal, a former monster and a human walked side by side, not as commander and enemy, but as proof that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, there is light waiting to be found. And sometimes it starts with a smile.